Chapter 8. When the terror caused by the executions had died down, the animals worked even harder than they had worked in the previous year to rebuild the windmill, which, together with the regular work of the farm, was a tremendous labor. There were times when it seemed to animals that they worked longer hours and fed no better than they had done in Jones's day. Napoleon was now never spoken of simply as Napoleon. He was always referred to in formal style as our leader, Comrade Napoleon. The pigs liked to invent for him such titles as Father of all animals or Terror of mankind. Napoleon was not seen in public as often as once in a fortnight. When he did appear, he was attended not only by his retinue of dogs, but by a black cockerel who marched in front of him and acted as a kind of trumpeter. It had become usual to give Napoleon the credit for every successful achievement and every stroke of good fortune. In the autumn, by a tremendous, exhausting effort, the windmill was finished. They thought of how they had labored, what discouragements they had overcome, and the enormous difference that it would be made in their lives when the cells were turning and the dynamos running. Tired out but proud, the animals walked round and round their masterpiece, which appeared even more beautiful in their eyes than when it had been built the first time. Moreover, the walls were twice as thick as before. Meanwhile, through his agency of Whymper, Napoleon was engaged in complicated negotiations with Frederick and Pilkington. At the same time, there were renewed rumors that Frederick and his men were plotting to attack Animal Farm and to destroy the mill. Sentinels were placed at all of the approaches to the farm, and 4 pigeons were sent to Foxwood with conciliatory messages. The very next morning, the attack came. The lookouts came racing in with the news that Frederick and his followers had already come through the 5-barred gate. Boldly enough, the animals sallied forth to meet them. But this time, they did not have the easy victory that they had in the Battle of Cowshed. 15 men with a dozen guns between them opened fire as soon as they got within 50 yards. The animals could not face the terrible explosions and the stinging pellets and were driven back. A number of them were already wounded. The whole of the big pasture, including the windmill, was in the hands of the enemy. A murmur of dismay went round. They were going to knock the windmill down. Impossible! We have built the walls far too thick for that. Blasting powder. The windmill had ceased to exist. At this sight, the animals' courage returned to them. The fear and despair they had felt the moment earlier were drowned in their rage against the vile, contemptible act. Without waiting for further orders, they charged forth in a body and made straight for the enemy. This time they did not heed the cruel pellets that swept over them like hail. It was a savage, bitter battle. The men fired again and again. A cow, 3 sheep, and 2 geese were killed. Nearly everyone was wounded. But the men did not go unscathed either. And when the 9 dogs of Napoleon's own bodyguard suddenly appeared on the men's flank, panic overtook them. They saw that they were in danger of being surrounded. Frederick shouted to his men to get out while the going was good, and the next moment the cowardly enemy ran for dear life. They had won, but they were weary and bleeding. Slowly they began to limp back toward the farm. They heard from the direction of the farm the solemn booming of a gun to celebrate the victory. What victory! But when the animals saw the green flag flying and heard the gun firing again, and heard the speech that Napoleon made congratulating them on their conduct, it did seem to them, after all, that they had won a great victory. The animals slain in the battle were given a solemn funeral. 2 whole days were given over to celebrations. There were songs, speeches, and more firing of the gun, and a special gift of an apple was bestowed on every animal. It was announced that the battle would be called the Battle of the Windmill.